Chair, I call the meeting to order, and I'll be commenting on that a little bit later in the meeting as we get to committee comments. So I want to, under roll call item, I want to welcome, I see Kinjal Amin is with us as a new member to the committee. My understanding is that Kinjal has not been sworn in yet with the town clerk's office. So you're welcome as a member of the committee, but a non-voting member at this point till you do swear in with the town clerk. Let's see, Marcia Bryant is also a new member. I don't know if she'll be able to join us tonight or not. I don't see her here yet. But again, we'll ask you to say a few words later on when we get to comments, so we hear a little bit about you, Kinjal. I just want to say also under roll call that Nancy did distribute a list of current up-to-date membership. We have, as we know, we all serve at the mayor's pleasure. Thank you, Mayor Wong. And there will be as many as 2 vacant seats to be filled as we move forward. So that's still in process.
And if anyone has if there's any wrong information on that contact list, just email it to me and I'll fix it when I send a new one out. I already have 2 corrections, so I'll be sending out a new one anyways. But if you can email me within the next day or 2, that would be great.
Thanks, Nancy. Old business. We have minutes of November 3rd. Any comments or corrections on them?
I'll move approval of the minutes from November 3rd.
Second.
Moved by Bob Berman, seconded by Bob Ike. Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hands or say aye.
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 Screen, thank you. Any nays? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, new business. Committee reports. Maxine, anything from outreach?
No new report.
All right. Leah, programming.
No report, but I'm probably going to be scheduling a meeting sometime soon.
Okay. Our third subcommittee, the construction manager committee, if we're in agreement, I would suggest that it's appropriate to dissolve that committee. We happily have made our selection. We have a CM in place. What I would suggest is that we create a new subcommittee to search for our owner project rep, our OPR. Looking for somebody that might be interested in chairing that subcommittee. Mr. Berman has raised his hand. So I don't think we need to formalize this any further if there are no objections to that. Bob, you want to put out some feelers to see who wants to join you on that committee, and then we can move forward with that. I know we haven't really made a timeline yet for that. I think we'll move right ahead. That'll be your first exercise, is to give us suggestions as to when we should have an OPR in place, and what kind of process we'll go through with that.
I will reach out to everybody later tonight with an email to see who's interested.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Okay. So next is our director's report from Elizabeth.
Thank you. We heard from Dr. Bob Selmer. He is the Director of Acoustics Program and Laboratory at the University of Hartford. His partner is a librarian at Bloomfield Public Library, and he has been enthusiastic about having his students do an applied acoustical design project. And I know that he has a working relationship with WIT from TSKP. So we are excited to hopefully have that move forward this upcoming semester. The staff has started conversations about talking about swing spaces, and I'll have more to report moving forward. And I also wanted to let everyone know that we've had a dramatic increase in library card signups. And I do think that part of that is everything about the library building project and moving forward. So just to give everybody an idea of what that means, last month we had 55 library card signups. A year ago at this time, it was 35. And ditto for the months of September and August, 54 in September, 65 in August, as opposed to 29 and 30 respectively last year. So I want to thank everybody for continuing to invite members of our community to enjoy all the resources Bloomfield Public Library has to offer. Thank you.
Great. Questions for Elizabeth?
I have one. Do we know whether the people from the new apartments are joining? Do you know anything about the addresses?
We do know that there's some people from the new, you mean Heirloom Apartments, I presume. Yes. And that is one of the spaces that we had one of the library building committee boards up, and we did hear back from their management that people were talking about it. So we do know that we did get some good positive feedback and people coming in specifically because they knew about the library building committee project.
Other questions for Elizabeth? Don't see any hands. All right, thanks, Elizabeth. All right, next is a project update from TSKP. Richard Sipik and Taisu Kim are with us.
Great, thanks very much, Mark, and congratulations on becoming elevated to chair of the committee. I'm going to share my screen if that's possible.
It is. And I'll forward this to the members of the building committee tomorrow. So you have
Okay,
it. And I'll also post it on the website.
all right, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I wanted to do is give the building committee a preview of what to expect next. And I want to revisit the timeline, the milestones in that timeline so that you become familiar with some terminology and what you'll see from us going forward. This should be familiar to you. This was a slide. We didn't prepare this timeline. This was prepared by Downs, and this was done prior to referendum in response to the question, well, what happens after the referendum? So now it's after the referendum, and what I've done is flesh this out a little bit more, and this should look somewhat familiar to you, except I changed some of the colors and highlights here. This is my version of what happens after the referendum. It's similar to the Downs schedule, but it just focuses on the design tasks before us. I imagine that pretty soon you're going to be hearing from the State Library Board about the decision on the grant. I know you are proceeding regardless of that, but I put that here as the first line item. And immediately following that, starting on December 1st is when we have been scheduling for the schematic design phase. Traditionally, architects work in 3 design phases. And up at the top, you'll see the initials SD, DD, and CD, which represents schematic design, design development, and construction documents. So you'll hear people talking about SD, DD, and CD. That's what they mean. So let's talk a little bit about the first phase, the schematic design phase, which, as I say, starts December 1st. And I've allocated 3 months for that duration, as you can see by the red dotted line here, dashed line. We are hoping that we can get the survey work done, some geotechnical work done on the site, as well as obtain a hazardous materials report, whatever asbestos or other material may be in the existing building, or I should say buildings. And then we'll prepare the schematic design drawings. I'll talk a little bit about what the deliverables will be during the schematic design phase. But what really is critical is getting all of that early site investigation work done. And I'm not sure whether the town proposes to hire someone who's on call or whether you are soliciting proposals, but that's critical to our going forward. And those reports are typically provided by the owner. At the end of schematic design will be an update in cost estimate from your construction manager. And then we'll proceed with design development. Assuming there are no hiccups in this schematic design, by hiccups, I mean like any delay of information, we'll continue immediately into design development, which I've scheduled to start in March 1 next year. And at that stage of the project, we'll be developing the site design in more detail, and then starting to prepare paperwork for getting reviews done by various agencies in town, as well as out-of-town agencies, such as state agencies. And then we'll submit paperwork to start the site plan approval process. Site plan approval process will go to planning and zoning, and they'll refer the project to a number of different people in town, such as the fire marshal, the town engineer. And then we'll go through a design review board period, and that's scheduled for roughly May or June of next year. Again, an update on the cost estimate, and presuming everything is in order, then we'll proceed with the construction documents phase, starting on June 1, according to my schedule. And that's roughly a 3-month period, plus or minus, with the intention of finishing all of the plans and specs, which is in the construction documents. And then those have to be submitted to the State Library Board for final review and approval before we can go out to bid, which I've tentatively targeted for mid-September. I'm sure that Downs has their own view of the schedule, and probably we'll be hearing from that tonight. So those are the major timelines going forward. And so the next question is, what are we going to be delivering at each stage? So typically architects do their work in the form of drawings and in the form of specifications, which are instructions to contractors on how to build a building. And at each step of every design phase step, we get more and more into details. And these percentages that I've indicated here are approximately the effort in each design phase. So the schematic design phase is roughly a 20% effort, design development roughly a 30% effort, and the biggest effort is in the construction documents, plans and specs, which is roughly 50% effort. And as you can see, the deliverables at each stage grows. So initially, what we'll be doing is schematic site plans, some preliminary grading, some drainage concepts, schematic architectural plans, sections, elevations. And I put in here also because our method of working also includes model making. So we will prepare a 3-dimensional model of the buildings and present them to you. The models are a great way to check every aspect of the building. It's an excellent representation of the building as a whole, rather than just the elevations. And we'll also do renderings, exterior renderings and interior renderings of the design. We'll also be working with our structural consultants and our mechanical, electrical, plumbing consultants. They will prepare the conceptual design for structural systems. How are the beams built? How are the columns? What is the foundation? On a preliminary conceptual level, in order for the Downs to do a more accurate cost estimate. And then from our mechanical engineers, we'll get narrative descriptions of the mechanical systems. I did list here in red, just below the heading of schematic design phase, what our initial tasks will be. We'll be focusing initially in the schematic design on all 4 elevations, especially on Prosser, because the new building doesn't exist yet. We have shared with you our conceptual illustrations for two aspects, two elevations as seen from the street, but we have not shown you all four sides. And it's crunch time, folks. Now we need to clearly illustrate all four sides from different vantage points. We also prepare as part of our initial tasks, a more detailed site plan, as well as bridge strategies, how we cross the Washbrook from the former Riley lumber site to this Prosser site. During design development, we get a lot more engineering information. We'll get drawings from all of the major engineering disciplines: structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, civil, IT, which is information technology, and audiovisual systems. And also during design development, we'll flesh out the architectural drawings much more. You'll now have accurate dimensions. We want to make sure everything is worked out dimensionally. And then we'll also have dimension site plans, walks, parking lots, landscaping concepts. And then we'll also start fleshing out the interiors. We'll have furniture and equipment illustrated to scale for each of the spaces. We'll also have room by room finish schedules. Exactly what are we doing on the floors, ceilings, and walls? And that becomes critical for checking the cost estimate during design development. We'll also have major construction details. What are the major exterior walls? How are they built? How is the roof built? What is the foundation detail? And interior major details. And at that point is when we start making our initial submissions to the local agencies. The local agencies really want a complete, fully fleshed out set of site drawings, very accurately dimensioned and illustrated. This is more critical for the Prosser library location than it is for the McMahon, because McMahon is an existing site. We're doing additions and renovations. For Prosser, it's a new building. They want to see everything that's proposed for the site. While those agencies are going through their reviews, we'll continue with construction documents. And as we get feedback from those agencies, we'll incorporate in the plans more details from those agency reviewers. For example, they may say, well, we need to add some plantings, we need to add some screening, whatever it is they comment on within their purview needs to be folded into the construction documents. So when the project goes out to bid, we will make sure that the bids include all of the comments from those agencies. So just to back up for a second, during schematic design, you might end up with maybe 15 sheets of drawings. During design development, you'll probably end up with perhaps even 30 or 40 sheets of drawings. But once we get into the construction documents phase, we'll probably end up with maybe 100 drawings from all our disciplines combined. And at that stage, we have full working drawings. These are the documents that contractors will use to build the building. They're also the same documents that will be used to get prices or bids from all the trade contractors. When we're finished with all the working drawings and full specifications, we'll turn all those documents over to the construction manager. He will bundle them into his bidding documents, and then you will be advertising. Nancy knows about this, advertising for bidding, because she's going to be involved in the bid process. And then during the bidding period, there will also be lots of questions from bidders. So what we do is formally respond to those questions in writing. Sometimes we supplement those responses with drawings or illustrations to clarify any questions raised by the bidders. So this gives you a step-by-step process as we go forward, as well as an idea of what kinds of material we'll be delivering at each stage. I don't know, Tyson, if you want to add anything at this point.
Well, Richard gave you a real good overall picture of what we're going to do and what you expect to see from us. And at the beginning, Richard said about survey is very critical for starting early. And I really re-emphasize that somehow we really should get the survey as soon as possible. And I really hate the survey. We don't see like, after mid-December or late December, because we cannot really finalize architectural concept and location of the building on site without seeing survey and contour and so on. So I hope our town has some surveyor be able to start working on this as soon as possible.
Are there any questions?
Just a couple of comments I want to make before I open it up to questions and so forth. Just to let everybody know that as far as this existing conditions information, the surveys, geotechnical, what do we have in the ground, and hazardous material investigations, Nancy is already working on those. Richard had reached out to me and to Downs about that. So there's probably going to be a combination of some on-call services we can take advantage of that have already been bid out publicly, and then soliciting of some prices. So we understand the urgency to document, what we have, so that designs are based on reality here. So that's in process. The other thing is I just want to say that the schematic design phase, although it's not specifically listed here, and Richard, I'm sure you'll agree with me, will include all of your code issues. You'll identify everything that needs to be taken care of as far as codes, so that no surprises later on once the floor plan is set, once we know what this looks like. So that all happens in the schematic design phase too.
Yes, Mark, that is correct.
Thank you. So any questions for Tai-Soo and Richard?
This is Kinjal.
Yes, I have I'm sorry, I raised my hand. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Go ahead, Mr. Reich.
Yes, I do. So that's not part of their scope of work, the preliminary, the survey, the environmental, that's not part of the designer's scope of work?
That is correct.
Now, are those costs included in our estimate?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Kinjal?
Just a couple of questions regarding the whole process with the schematics, DDs and CDs. You mentioned, going through the layouts and all that stuff. Are there going to be any page turn meetings happening with the building committee to kind of go through what the progress is and what tweaks, and just do some 3D renderings and such?
Page turner meetings, my goodness, you certainly are familiar with the process. So yes, we imagine that we will have page turner meetings. We've been meeting with the committee virtually for quite some time, but I think it would be really beneficial if we had live meetings, if it's possible. It could be done with the committee. It could be done also with a subcommittee, should the subcommittee wish to have members of the committee attend, and we would invite them to the office here. We could go through each of the sheets. We could also distribute copies in PDF form, should the committee members who feel comfortable reviewing the sheets give us their comments as well. We can handle it any number of ways. But live meetings, great for page reviews.
I agree. My recommendation would be to do on-site, wherever it's selected, review page turn meetings. Off of that, eventually when we get into the progress of the design phase and stuff like that, are we going to do any detailed MEP review meetings as well, or is that something that you're planning on just coordinating internally?
No, we can invite our engineers to whatever meetings you would like, and if you have like a director of facilities or a town-wide engineering department who is in charge of all of the town facilities to participate in those meetings with engineers, I would welcome that as well.
Okay,
Yeah, Kinjal, just so you know, I'm in favor of more meetings rather than less meetings to review all those things.
especially in the SD and DD, so these guys can just cruise through
Yeah,
the
a
CDs.
lot of information out there, a lot of decisions to be made, and I'm sure we'll assemble a core group to fill in between building committee meetings so progress can keep going,
Yeah.
and keep the building committee informed. I think that's really important to get the right people looking at all this stuff as often as possible, so that eliminate those surprises and we know what we're getting. And as Richard just said, I think it's incorporating public works into the process is also very important, because this building will be turned over to them to maintain.
Yep.
So that's part of it too. And eventually we'll have a commissioning agent as well, involved in that process with how things operate and turning it over to public works.
Agreed.
Hand up by Bob Berman.
Thank you. One thing I didn't see on this was when you anticipate construction to start, which really means demolition first.
Right, so I think Downs may be able to provide that answer. I know that they've been thinking about it. I did have one conversation with them last week, so I think they may be prepared to talk about the construction schedule.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be hearing from Downs as well.
Right.
And I mean, this is a balancing act between, Downs is going to really be in charge of the overall schedule, which will incorporate all the schedule items that Richard has just shared with us. And I know communication has already started between TSKP and Downs to start ironing out, how this schedule really is going to work for us best. Some decisions to be made. But we're going to hear from Downs next. Lois. Oh, you're muted.
I need to say this as respectfully as I can, and that is that in the course of the referendum, everybody, not everybody, but most people were thrilled that there was going to be a new library. Some people were not completely pleased with the design. And repeatedly, we said that this is not the final design, that there will be changes to it over time. We have the program done, I think. I don't think there's any question about the amount of space or the type of thing that we need inside the library. But there was considerable comment about how the library looked from the outside. And a portion of the people in Bloomfield hoped that it would be more traditional. Other people just loved it. In all of its phases, other people sort of liked it and it was fine. But I think to honor the people to whom we said, we will look again to see about whether it could be more traditional. I think now, since it is crunch time, would be the time to ask for something that would look more traditional, just so that people can firmly make a choice. The committee never voted for a particular design. That wasn't what we were about at the time. We just wanted to get the referendum passed, wanted to be sure we'd have a new library. So my request is that we have another drawing which is more traditional, just so that people will know that we considered it. It can be rejected if that's what the committee wants, but I think we need to consider it at least.
Thanks, Lois. Richard, do we still have you there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to comment on that for us as this design process goes forward, because the goal is at the end of schematic design, we know what this looks like.
Right.
So this is the time to be doing all that.
Well, we would need to, we work at the pleasure of the committee. We need to make sure that the committee endorses each design phase. We would like to have a formal review and approval process before we proceed to the next phase of design. So Whatever it takes to get the committee comfortable is something that we will strive for. It would be certainly helpful if we had a little bit more direction from the committee about what material would be necessary to address Lois's suggestion. But I look to the committee for that direction.
Well, I'm sure we can provide that. As we've said, there's a lot of design to go. You know, to date, we've seen sort of two sides of the building, and there's so much more to a building than that. So you'll be incorporating a lot of things, you know, as time goes on here quickly. But we will do our best to give you that kind of information so that we can head in that direction. And I think that word traditional is the key. I've heard it from other people as well. There are people out there that want to be able to use that word in some shape, form, when they look at this building, not necessarily in its entirety, but at least in some fashion. That's the message I'm getting from some people. So I think it's important that you know, as the design develops and is filled out, and we look at the rest of the building and the bridge, and you know, there's a lot of opportunity there to incorporate some other thoughts. So we're going to be into it now quickly.
Yeah, I would like to get some more direction from the committee, and then we'd be happy to respond.
All right, we will. I don't know. Well, we have some other comments here. We have hands up. Elizabeth.
Yes, I wanted to first speak in my official capacity as director and relay the many comments that we've received from the public wanting and enjoying the designs in the first iterations, including the very first one that we saw from TSKP. I also want to speak as a mom with young children and speaking about Bloomfield in 2021 and Bloomfield in the future. These buildings are going to be around for decades. And when I hear the word traditional, I'm not really hearing a welcoming of the youth and of younger families and of new families to Bloomfield. These buildings should speak to everyone, not just a small subset. And I do think that this smaller subset is a loud subset, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the majority. And a lot of the comments we are hearing in our programs and people using the facilities is not using the word traditional.
Ava.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of points here. There has been testimony to the council. There have been loads of conversations, and there are a number of people who feel very strongly about the quote unquote traditional design. And there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about moving, you know, toward the future. At one of our committee meetings, Jesse White spoke quite eloquently about the difference in perspective when we talk about honoring traditions and honoring history. Not everyone sees all of that as a positive. So this is a delicate line that I think has not always been addressed. Some of us also feel invisible, and that's not a very comfortable feeling when we've worked very hard to bring this project forward. I understand compromise, but I think there needs to be a sense that in compromise, everyone has something they're happy about, something they're not happy about, but there is not one group only who brings forward a design and we all just accept it. And that's as much the design that I prefer as other designs. But I think we need to look at a lot of different perspectives here. And I think that's something that needs to happen sooner than later. Thanks.
Kinjal.
All right, so kind of going off of what Elizabeth was saying, but also what the other concerns are. I think we can come up with some kind of an idea that kind of embraces some kind of traditional look, because you do have a lot of masonry buildings and such around in the downtown area. However, you know, I do kind of like the idea of having some natural light, and I'm sure that's part of the LEED gold point system that was taken into account for having the glass exterior on, I think it was one of the sides, if not two of the sides of the building that I saw. I agree with most of the people who made comments. We need to look at different exterior elevations on the building, which Richard said he needs some direction from us. Richard, what specifically do you need from us to get guidance on?
Well, oops, yeah, I'll let Tyson talk in a minute, but during the conceptual design stage, we did hear about brick was preferred. I think at some iteration, we did not show brick. And also, we also showed some columns, which were reminiscent of the church on the town green, but there was some question about why are we representing that. But it is the columns, along with a solar brise soleil or screen, which was used to articulate the exterior and also create some sort of shading effect, created a very rich exterior. And then there was also some discussions about what the bridge looks like and whether or not the bridge should have some elements. So I'm looking to Taisu, what he recalls during that and where we ended up landing and whether what other things are still open to consideration.
Well, Louis said, as you said, you know, design people see the same thing in a very different way. And when people say traditional, again, what is a traditional can interpret it so many different ways. So I think the best way is, you know, you guys hired us based on our reputations and our work done. I think architecture is based on idea and also, but it's an architect's ability to translate idea to building. And what I'm saying is that the architect, this integrity is involved in here, rather than just hearing from other people saying, can you try this, can you try that? You end up mishmash and it's just a terrible building. So you really have to give architects some kind of trust and believe his ability to be able to translate your desire into a through creative process, create something wonderful. And here is wonderful is not only interpret traditional idea into a new building, but also, you know, as Elizabeth said, open, inviting, exciting, something people is excited about. Those are the whole the direction of architecture. Somebody told me, go look at the Simsbury Library. I hope you guys go to see Simsbury Library. Certainly the libraries, I don't think it's traditional because they just copy the building across the street. That's not what we're going to do. And the building there, the Simsbury Library is a brick building. It doesn't have even entrance. It doesn't, I don't know how to get into that even building. Very uninviting. It's like any other brick building next door, like a dormitories or something, schools and something like that. So what I'm going to say here is, I think the idea of your library is very based on traditional idea of brick and also white, reflecting some of the, trying to connect with the church and so on. And the concept is based on where that building is, site, on site, is a small creek there and corner site, trees, and all these things is combined together. So what I'm going to say, finalizing is we're gonna listen to you. We heard a lot of you guys saying about traditional, try this, try that, and we did that. I hope you you think we did listen to you guys. So we're gonna build a model. We're gonna design the building and show it to you. And to me, it's very, has a concept of tradition is very built into this building. Yet it does have open, inviting, something fresh, new, people get excited about. We're going to show it to you. So I think we are not kind of architect. You know, somebody say, try this, try that, we try this, try that. It's just not going to turn into a good building. So I think you can give us some trust and let us try and give you make a model and show elevation, some rendering and so on, so that you can see the design we will put through and come up with I really believe will satisfy your interest of contextual harmony with the building and based on traditional idea, yet it's a fresh building. So that's I have to say.
Yeah, Taisu, I admire your unwillingness to design by committee. I mean, I think that's the worst thing we could do.
Yeah.
But I do trust you to listen. You've been listening. Like we said before, there's a lot more to look at on this building. We've only seen a little bit. We're going to see a lot more very soon, and we'll have opportunity to comment. Bob Ike, you've got your hand up. You're muted.
Chairman, I just, because this could go on and on. What is the approval process? Because the previous building committees I've served on, there was a step by step. Who makes the final decision? Once Ty presents the design, what is the approval process?
Well, this committee will approve the schematic design.
Okay.
Before we move on to design development.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Bob Berman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number one, when we end up seeing the other two sides of the building we haven't seen yet, I think some of the concerns about tradition are going to disappear, because I think we're going to find that a lot of the things people were talking about are already covered. So I think that's going to end up being taken care of there. And until we see that, I think any discussions about what's the design really going to look like, what are the changes going to be from what we've seen already, I think we need to see the other two sides, the back, and when you're facing the building from the front, the right side. So once we have that, I think we'll have a better feel for the whole thing. What I find interesting is I have yet to hear anybody say anything negative about the design for McMahon-Wittenberry, which is really futuristic with the way they designed the glass. Yet everybody's concentrating on Prosser and not paying any attention to future. I don't want to call it a future design, but the design for a future 20, 30 years from now that they've done for McMahon-Wittenberry. I think they've included in their design for Prosser that concept of looking further ahead with how they designed the front. I don't know what I call it, the Tungsten Avenue side of Prosser. Not to dovetail with what they did at McMahon-Wittenberry, but to show that they're looking at it in a different way than what currently exists. That's why I said, I think when we see the other two sides, we end up with where the bridge actually is located and where it starts, etc. I think we'll find that some of those concerns are going to be addressed there. Thank you.
All right. All right, let's move to project update from Downs. Scott is here and Tom is here.
Good evening,
Yep,
everybody.
thanks, Mark. Take it away, Scott.
Yeah, let me just get to the screen. So we're going to keep it a little simple, simpler, just for an update. In regards to the schedule update, as Richard had mentioned, we've had a few meetings with TSKP. We've come to a determination at the moment that a demolition package, as being an early bid package, is a strong possibility for both these projects to hit the ground running. And you know, it's in very early stages, but you know, it could be something for a September go, in lieu of starting, you know, in the end of October, going into November, as far as that phase goes. But we're just going to keep that on the docket and try to push towards that as more information comes in and more items get completed. Site logistics development, just keeping the Rotary on the docket here for the agenda, just so we have our eye on it as we get more updates. Item 3, verification of existing conditions. So Mark had gone through that, and I had a few conversations with Nancy about environmental consultant, a site survey consultant, some geotech consultant options, and we passed along some information as options as well for consultants. So I know the town is working hard on that. And item 4, just keeping an eye on the library grant approval process, which I believe is due at the end of this month. I'm not sure, Mark, if you've had any further information on that. I know it's going through its motions.
I do not, perhaps Elizabeth. I think we're just still waiting to hear on the 22nd. Is that correct?
Monday at 2 o'clock, the meeting starts.
Good. Okay. And lastly, Nancy, if there's any comments on Downs's draft contract, let us know, and we'll address them accordingly.
I will. So far, I have none.
Okay. And at the moment, that's what I have to report, Mark.
All right. Questions for our construction manager? See any, Kinjal?
Just a quick question regarding ongoing estimation of the project. I don't have all the documents and stuff in front of me, but what are your plans on providing updated estimates as the design phase progresses?
Yeah, so we have it scheduled at the moment where each time a percentage of drawings comes out, as Richard laid out in his presentation. For instance, when you have a 20% SD drawing specifications, or drawings rather, we're going to take those and provide an estimate to you. And then when a DD drawing set comes out, we're going to provide another estimate. And then the final estimate will be the CD drawings prior to just going out to bid. So
Okay.
we'll be going the whole way.
Could we add possibly a progress estimate during the CD phase as well in there?
It's something we can look into. I mean, I feel we're progressing with the estimates as we go, but you know, we can talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to double check that in your contract.
I believe in our contract, we have 3 estimates.
Yeah, I think we have 3 estimates. Mark. SDDD
And
the
50%.
GMP would be based on actual trade bids. It's crafted.
Once
We can
the
double check.
CDs are done, that would be a final bid, right?
Yes.
So, and again, I don't have the contract language or anything in front of me, but I think it would behoove us as a committee and a team to kind of just get a pulse as to the CD progress is going on, maybe 75% or something like that. So
Yep, I believe Richard had 80% there. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but I think that's where you had.
At
Yes.
least Richard's, it was 20, 30, and then 50% was the CDs, but I don't think I saw anything about a progress estimate for the CDs. And I guess it goes to TSKP. Would you be able to provide a 75% complete set or something that Downs can just kind of get us a pulse on what's going on?
Yes, Kitchell, I think that's a very good idea, but it may be a 75-80% submission. In fact, I think 100% CD estimate is not very valuable. We would like to get an estimate before we get to the end of CDs,
Agreed.
just in case we needed to make a correction to get it back online. So I would encourage, if Downs in their contract has 3 estimates, one at the end of SD, one at the end of DD, and then one perhaps at 75% or 80% complete CDs.
Yeah.
That sounds like something we had in the contract. I know we're still working that out, but I agree. I think we need to
Yeah, we're definitely working.
have that rather than the 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100% is going to
would
be
be
a
when we
bid.
get the trades in. Right, when the trade bids come in. Yeah, we have, I'm pretty sure we have 3 estimates and we can craft them in any way you want. Yeah. Yep,
And
no problem.
I guess the other thing is on the estimation process, are you going to be reaching out to the major trades to have input regarding actual costs, or is this going to be an in-house estimate happening?
Everything will likely be done in-house, and we will check some things with the market and possibly pull in some specific trade contractors to check some pricing. Absolutely. Yep, we definitely want to keep our finger on the pulse, especially with the volatility of the market.
Yeah, my suggestion would be to at least try to reach out to mechanical, electrical, MEP trades, and possibly if there's going to be curtain walls, I would like to see some live data for the curtain walls.
Yeah, the glassing glazers, definitely. Yep, most certainly.
Richard, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mark. So I see on the screen we have Downs's pre-construction schedule. And I see on line item 2, site logistics development, town to review state traffic commission if rotary on Route 189 is still a project. That's a critical ingredient because that affects potentially any improvements around the site. During the conceptual design, we were talking about, well, who's going to pay for any undoing of site improvements should the timing of any state rotary occur after you're finished with the building, and then they come and have to undo it. So it would be good to pin that down. I don't know if anybody can share any new information about that.
Well, I know we're staying in touch with the town engineer. He's the best source. And Nancy's always in touch with him. But you know, the best we can do is stay in touch with the state and understand not only their design thinking, but the budgetary process, you know, through the state. You know, they could say now that, yes, it's a go, and it might not happen for X number of years just because of the way the money flows. So I think we're just going to have to stay on top of it and be ready, you know, should they pull the trigger on it. I think it's just going to be a question mark as we move forward that we're just going to have to keep checking on.
I agree with Mark. And the state, in town's opinion, has been reluctant to shut the door and say no, but what they have said to us is that the traffic counts do not support the design that they did. So they're back to the drawing board on what they're going to do, if anything, at that intersection. But they didn't come right out and say that it's totally dead. They just said that their initial thinking was not supported by the traffic count. So they're not pursuing that. And that's about as much as we got out of them.
Well, you are dealing with the state. So Perhaps, would you agree that it would be prudent for us to show a dotted line of potential impact on the site due to rotary construction, so that when we're talking to our site guys, or we're talking to even bidders, there could be an impact at some point. You need to create perhaps a dotted line that says future rotary by the state.
I think
That
that
might
makes a
not
lot of
be a-
sense.
It does, although, the state, especially DOT, does not move quickly. So I think by the time we're out to bid, they're still not going to have anything definitive. That would not be something that I think we should count on by the state, but by all means, I think if we put some dotted lines into potential impact, that would probably be helpful.
Okay, good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm sure there's going to be some decisions that'll have to be made based on that dotted line. What does that limit us to do? What does it force us to do that we might not want to do if they didn't go forward? So, all that discussion has to take place. And hopefully, well, like Nancy says, I don't even know that dotted line will be in any way accurate by the time we go out to bid. Hopefully it can be, but it's going to be a constant pain dealing with that as we go forward. That maybe situation.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Scott, I think, did you have some preliminary discussions with District 2 on this already? Make
Yeah,
some calls.
I think it was District 1, and
District 1.
yeah, they weren't too forthcoming in information, but they did say the traffic controller would get back to me. I haven't heard anything yet, so I figured I'd poke them again and see what happens.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions for Downs? Mr. Berman.
Thank you. Just a comment on the rotary thing. When I contacted my contacts at DOT back in August and early September, they told me that the single lane design they'd done wasn't going to work in Bloomfield, and they weren't going to proceed with that. When I asked, well, what's that mean? They said, well, if we do anything, it's going to be not in the near future. Well, with the DOT, not in the near future means not within 5 years. Even with all the infrastructure money they get, they have better uses for it than to try and do 2 rotaries in the center of Bloomfield. So my guess is that if they do anything, we will be done with the library construction long before they even begin to consider it and start the process over again.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to 2022, our meeting schedule. Nancy has provided us with that proposed schedule. Do we have a motion to
So move, Mr. Chairman.
accept?
So
I'll
move.
second it.
Thank you, Bob. And Bob, any other discussion on it?
Yeah, I just have one comment that please take a look. Nancy sent out a revised one today. Make sure that's the one you're looking at. Because there are some changes in meeting dates.
Yeah, make sure it's the one that says February dates are the 9th and the 23rd.
Yes.
Yep.
Just another comment on this. It's very easy to cancel meetings if we don't need them. I mean, there's going to be phases of the project where we perhaps don't need to meet every 2 weeks. And I'm not afraid to say that when we don't need to meet. And there's also opportunities to add meetings as special meetings with certain parameters, but it's better to set us up for every 2 weeks like this is. Any other comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. Say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. I want to, let's see, our next 2 meetings are December 1st and December 15th. Anybody have any problems with those that we know of? I will not be here on December 15th. I'm gonna roll that into comments. I'm gonna start our comments from committee members. First of all, I want to thank our mayors, that's plural, for appointing me as chair of the committee. And I want to congratulate our new mayor, Danielle Wong. Nice to have you with us, and the entire town council. I really want to thank Greg Davis as our past chair of this committee for everything he's done. He's really left some very, very big shoes to fill. I'm not just saying that because he's a lot taller than I am. He set a great example for us, and he got us through referendum. So thank you, Greg. Wish you the best on town council. I mentioned our new members. We have Dr. Marcia Bryant, who is now with us. I see you on the screen. I see a picture. I guess you're on the phone with us. And Kinjal is with us. I'd like to hear from each one of you a little bit. I'm sure the committee would like to hear very briefly a little bit about you. I know I didn't warn you about that, but please give us a little information about yourselves. Kinjal, you want to go first? Did we lose you? No, there you are. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. My name's Kinjal. Been in this town for about 12 years. My background's mostly construction, so this is right up the field for me, and had shown a little bit of interest, and some of the town council members were kind enough to invite me to this committee.
Nice to have you. Welcome.
Thanks.
And Marcia, can you unmute yourself? Maybe we'll have to come back to you. We'll come back to you when you're able to do that. Okay, so other comments from committee. Mayor Wong? Comments from you?
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much for your willingness to serve and lead and chair this space. I know you guys are going to miss Greg, but he's not going to be too far at all. Kudos and congratulations to this entire committee. Everyone poured their heart out. I saw a lot of folks knocking doors and really advocating for this. So it is upon you and your backs and your hard works that the referendum passed. So I do thank each and every one of you for your hard work. And I know we're all excited to see the development and design and really the hard work come into fruition as we proceed with the bonding. So that's really exciting. I want to welcome our two new members. Familiar face, Kinjal, welcome. I don't think I've met Dr. Bryant, but welcome to the team. I'm excited to kind of listen, let you guys lead and be here in a supportive capacity from an advocacy standpoint. And thanks again for your hard work and your willingness to serve the town of Bloomfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to add that it's not on our agenda tonight. It will be on our agenda for the next meeting to elect a vice chair. And I will be looking to appoint a secretary as well. So we'll take care of that at next meeting. Other comments from committee members? Bob Berman?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, a couple things. Number one, I want to talk about when you're doing the designs, I want to talk about the bridge for one thing. I'm concerned about a couple of different things about the bridge. Number one, it needs to be far enough back for where it starts on the Riding property so that we don't have any issues with flooding when Washbrook does flood, which we know it does more often than not, unfortunately. In addition, that bridge I believe needs to have heated cables in its floor, because otherwise we're going to have problems keeping it clear during the winter. And I don't want to see that happen. And also I suggest you make sure that the service of that floor is not totally smooth. It needs to be some kind of pebbly so that people can get a grip on it. And I'm not sure, and Lois Hager brought this up initially, I believe, I'm not sure where the bridge actually should start and where it should end. I think that's something that we really need to think about fully. And as a suggestion thing outside of the box, maybe it would make more sense to start it not at the front of the riding property, which is near Washbrook, but at the other end of it. And do it with, because if we do that, then it's a much shallower incline. Make it much easier for people to get up when they're pushing strollers, they're in wheelchairs, or they're using walkers or canes. And again, remember, it needs to be wide enough for two wheelchairs to pass each other comfortably. The other issue I want to bring up are the restrooms in the facility. We had some issues at the Human Services Building. And one of the things I have noticed at the Human Services Building is, as much as they lowered the threshold going into the bathrooms, it still creates issues for people in wheelchairs. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen in this building. In addition, rather than have push buttons to open the doors for people so that anybody in any physical condition can get in and out, I would suggest you think about having a motion detector sliding door into the wall. I think that can be done. One door, it can work. I think you need to take a look at that as a possible option, because I think that would solve a lot of problems. In addition, make the transition from the hallway into the restrooms seamless, no raised threshold, create issues for people getting in and out. And the one last thing question I have, which is really for Elizabeth, and it's something to think about before she responds, and I'm not looking for a response tonight, is what is the community room going to be used for during the day when the library is open? I'd like to hear what the thinking is on that. I understand what the thinking is for the evenings. I want to know what the thinking is for during the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Other comments from committee members? Don't see any hands up. All right.
Lois has her hand
Lois,
up, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
except she just disappeared.
Here I am. I have two things. One is that I really would love to have a walk over there so that we can see what it's going to be like to with the strollers and so forth, how long a walk it's going to be to get that from the, I know we can't do it because there's no bridge, but if it were at least marked where the bridge is going to start, it would help us know how far somebody would have to walk with a stroller and kids in order to get into the library. I'm worried about I'm worried about the winter time trying to get to a program with little kids. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think it's going to be a beautiful building with respect to the creativity of going across the bridge, but I just want to be sure it's safe and convenient for everybody. Second thing is that I would be very grateful if people would keep track of the choices that we make that keep us from making this a net zero building and how much those cost. Because after all of the discussion about climate change, I think we at least ought to be making decisions as we go along that will be in the future best for the environment. I am thrilled that both buildings are going to have solar. I think that's just wonderful, but there may be some other choices that we could make along the way. And I don't know what those are, but if I assume that someone does know and that we could be told when we're making the choices and how much they're costing or not costing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. Elizabeth?
Yes, I just wanted to address a couple things, starting with ADA accessibility. That is one of the most important reasons we are moving forward with this project. And I wanted to note that at Prosser, where the parking lot currently is, there will be, I believe, 22 parking spots there, including plenty of handicap parking. So we will continue to make sure that everyone can get into the library safely. And I'm quite confident that with the Riley parking lot, it will still not be terribly hard to get into the library, especially for able-bodied folks. I also wanted to comment on the community room. The community room will be used all the time, and I'm not sure how to respond so fully to that for those who may not be used to coming to library programs. But I just wanted to give some numbers since COVID. This is since COVID, including all, shut in and everything. We've had 888 programs with 18,913 participants. I can tell you that if it was not COVID, those numbers would be more than doubled. So that community room at Prosser will be used for all age groups, programs of all kinds. And I'm hopeful that we'll see even more ways of using that space. There's also a smaller community room space at McMahon-Wittenberry that will also be used to full capacity with programs and meetings for groups. It's smaller at McMahon-Wittenberry, the new rendition, but the community room will be used in a variety of ways for programs, but also for other things throughout the day, as would be in non-COVID times now. So we look forward to that. And Bob, let me know if you want more details about the types of programs, things of that nature. I can provide that for you. We were actually just at our last library board meeting last week, remembering pre-COVID times, because the library board used to meet in the Prosser community room, and we would have to get the heck out of there because librarian Nicole would hold programs for tweens and teens at 6:30, and she would be at the door, knocking on the door to get us out of there. So that room is in very high demand at all times. And I look forward to a post-COVID future where it will be back in business at all times.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Any other comments from committee members? All right, Nancy, we can move on to public comments.
Anybody from the public, please raise your hand. Okay, we've got a couple. First one is Ursula Dang. Ursula, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, it's nice to see you guys. Thank you. Congratulations on the successful outcome of the referendum, and thank you for all the work you've done on this committee. I wanted to comment a little bit on the discussion about the design. Again, we were talking about the whether the design was traditional or contemporary. And I think one of the reasons people were surprised at first at when this design came out was that it seemed very kind of urban for our community. I think one of the things that people are concerned about that our community has a very big commitment to is the natural environment of our downtown center and preserving that. And so I think there's a hope that we will try to make the building be reflective of our commitment to nature and ecology and the environment. I think that we've made some really good progress in that direction. I think moving that front entrance to the Tungus Ave side of the building was a really good change. I have still concerns about how that we're doing that bridge in the back. I think that kind of forcing people to walk from the Riley Lumber parking lot on that bridge, kind of forcing them to go all the way to that front entrance is going to be something that people are really not going to appreciate when this building is completed. I would really like to see a bridge that maybe, as I think Bob was saying, more to the north end of the parking lot, really, I think one that accommodates vehicles to be able to go into that main parking lot for the library, if they need to drop off people or equipment, to be able to swing to the left and go into that parking lot with their car, and easily access that parking lot with their car, is something that you should really think about and really consider, as opposed to having to drive out the other way and go and kind of a convoluted way to go back to park into that Riley parking lot. The walkway that goes from that parking lot right now kind of forces people to walk all the way up the side of that building to the front. I really think we need to have an entrance in the back of the building that anyone can use coming from that Riley parking lot, just the way we do right now. I don't think that should really change. I think that that's a part of the design that of the current library that works well. Most people use that entrance in the back of that building. And not that it needs to be like the main entrance, it can be like the back door. But having that second entrance that is easy for people to access the building from the back, as well as having a nice formal front entrance facing the town center, I think are some design features that you should really think about. I guess those are the main 2 points that I know. I mentioned this with Mark once before. He mentioned that security might be an issue with having more than one entrance. And I think that if that's the issue, that we can think about how we do security in the building in different ways. There are many libraries. I mean, I go to the Hartford Library and I park in the parking lot there, and I use the back entrance, but they still have a nice formal front entrance on the main street. So I hope you would consider keeping the back door as a main entryway for people to get into from that parking lot, and having a different kind of bridge going to the building. Thank you so much for listening.
Other public comments, Nancy?
Anyone else in the public? I don't see any hands up, so, oh, wait, okay, thanks. Stan, I see your hand go up and down, but I'm assuming you want to speak, so I'm going to allow you to go. So go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and speak, Stan Casperson.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Greg. This is Sten Casperson, 6 Stonehill Road here in Bloomfield. I have 3 comments to the committee, 3 inputs to the committee, if I may say. The first one is to pick up on the previous suggestion, as well as Lois Hager's suggestion, saying, hey, the committee ought to group over in the Riley parking lot and pace off how far you have to go to the proposed main entrance at Tungus and Mountain Avenue. That's a very good idea. Picture a footbridge. You will find, as I saw on an early version of TSKP, that you might be walking the length of a football field to get from the north end of that parking lot to that main intersection. That needs to be seen and done. Secondly, on TSKP's schematic design layout, to follow up on what Lois was asking, I saw nothing about implementing the lead consultant's $20,000 budget item to get a heads up on what lead might cost and taken time for this building. I'll just interject that I just recently conducted a tour of a brand new building called the Hersey Center on the University of Hartford campus. It's 59,000 square feet, etc. I asked specifically the project manager and the architect from Payette, why is this building LEED certified? Their answer was no. I asked why, they said cost and schedule. I can't quantify it, but this needs to be looked at early on I think it needs to be added to TSKP's schedule. And last, 4 sides of the building, renderings of 4 sides of the buildings. I would like to suggest that there be a 5th view. And that view would be a drone type view from across Mountain Avenue, looking towards the proposed footbridge, porch, entrance, including the traffic light at Tungus Mountain and Bloomfield Avenue. This building, following up on the question on the Rotary, it was proposed early on that this building be as close as possible to the state right-of-way. People need to see what the relative perspectives are of that entrance at that location from the point of view of an overhead. Thank you very much.
Anyone else, Nancy?
No.
All right. Thank you, everybody. If Leah, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I just real quick, I wanted to address the entrance concerns. The plan is to have a lower level entrance near the handicap parking, and it will have an elevator that people can take to the 2nd floor. So just wanted to clarify that for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for our, let's see, as Greg has been doing, this is our 32nd meeting. So thank you, one and all. And I'm really looking forward to working with everybody, continuing to work with everyone. We've got a great committee. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Bob Ike, seconded by
Chris Grant.
Thank you, Chris. All in
Happy
favor,
Thanks-
say aye.
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 Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes, happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
You
Yes,
as
happy
well.